Hello and thanks for joining me. I'm in the workshop today and I've got the Harley-Davidson up on the workbench because I'm about to replace the starter motor clutch. This is a relatively easy job, but of course, as with any job, you need to know what you're doing. So I thought I would record the process in case it is useful, helpful to somebody else that is wanting to do this job. And as with most of the mechanical jobs that I do in the workshop, I will also put an information sheet including all of the key torque settings you need, things like that, up on my Buy Me a Coffee account. So I'll put a link to that in the description to this video. You can download that information sheet for free. There's absolutely no obligation to buy me a coffee, but of course if you would like to buy me a coffee, I'll be absolutely delighted. Now, my bike is a 2008 Dyna Fat Bob. The procedure that I'm going to go through is relevant to all 96cc twin cams up to 2010. In 2011, Harley-Davidson changed the starter motor that they fitted to the bikes. So if you've got a later bike, then the procedure is very similar to the steps that you're going to see me go through. It's just that you'll see that the starter motor that I'm handling is different to the one on your bike. So if you have a Softail or you have a Dyna, should be a similar kind of procedure. Now if you've got a Softail, you'll need to remove the oil tank first to be able to get to the starter motor. If you've got a Dyna like mine, then you need to remove the battery and the battery box. Now people have said to me, oh, it's not essential, you can get the starter motor off without removing the battery box. But to be honest, it's such a fiddly faff getting in there, I don't consider it worth it. Removing the battery and the battery box is a very quick and easy thing to do, and then it just gives you so much more space to work. If you're not sure how to do that, I actually recorded a video a while back, which is on my channel, about how to disconnect and remove the battery from your bike. So please have a watch that video. I'll put a link to it somewhere because if you've got an alarm on your bike, which you probably have, you need to know how to disable the alarm before you can remove the battery as well. So in this video, I'm going to remove the starter motor from the bike. I'll then get the starter motor on the workbench, I'll disassemble the starter motor and replace the clutch, and then obviously put it all back together and back on the bike. So let's get on with the job, shall we? Okay, so I hope you can see what I'm doing here. It's a bit difficult to film when it's all black on black, but here's the starter motor, of course. So removing it is fairly straightforward. First of all, you just got to disconnect. That's the positive lead from the battery there to the starter motor, so just take that off. Then this is the solenoid down here, so that's just an electric plug that needs disconnecting. And then the starter motor assembly is fastened to the primary The starter motor assembly is fastened to the primary crankcase with two Allen bolts. There's one, I don't know if you can see if I point, there's one here and there's one here, but if you're doing this, it's quite obvious which they are. So just four things to undo and then you can pull it out. Here's the solenoid connector. It's just a plastic electrical connector, so you just need to squeeze it and then it pulls out. That's very easy to disconnect. And then disconnecting the electric power connection from the battery. It's always frustrating on modern Harley-Davidsons. You're never sure whether it's going to be imperial or metric. In this case, it seems to be a 12mm spanner that fits. So just undo that and move that power cable out the way. And just so I don't lose it, I'll put the nut back on the terminal there so I know where it is. Okay, so now just need to remove the two Allen head bolts. Hopefully I've got the camera and the lighting lined up now so you can see the two mounting bolts clearly. At this point there's one here and there's one here, and they are 1/4 inch Allen bolts. So I've just got a long extension here with a rocker on the end, and I'm going to get in there and undo both of those. It's not that long ago since I had this apart actually, so I'm not expecting anything to be too tight or seized.
So with the bolts out, just rock it slightly to pull it out, and there we are, that's the starter motor off. So I think before I start pulling that apart, I'm going to give it a good clean. It's pretty dirty. This starter motor assembly is just so dirty. I'm just going to give it a quick clean in my parts washer before I take it apart. Carefully, of course. So I don't want to get gunk inside it, but nor do I want to get a lot of dirt inside it when I pull it apart. So just get the worst of it off. Just blow this off with my airline a bit just to get the list of the... Can't hear what I'm saying when I'm doing that, can you? Just get the rest of the cleaning fluid off it. Okay, so we've got the assembly cleaned up, so I'm going to start taking it apart. I really don't like disassembling parts that are really dirty because there's just so, well, of course it's just not nice working on dirty things, but also just risk of getting dirt inside. And as we've got, you know, electric motors and spinning shafts and clutch assemblies and what have you in here, just don't want to get dirt in it. So if you've not taken one of these apart before, they're actually fairly straightforward. Within this assembly, there are actually three different units, three different housings. So this is the motor itself here. So there's the motor armature within this bit. This is the part with the long bolts through it. And then this assembly here with the post where the, you know, the thick cable comes from the battery, that's the solenoid. So the solenoid contains a plunger which plunges forward this way. If I just turn it this way, so it plunges forward, which then pushes the drive shaft and the clutch assembly. You can just see the end of that. That's the pinion gear there on the end of the drive shaft. It pushes that forward, and that then engages with the gears on the clutch assembly inside the primary case. So we've actually got the three separate units here. We've got the motor, we've got the solenoid and the plunger assembly in here, and then we've got the clutch and the drive shaft. So the only bit that I really need to get to is the drive shaft and the clutch assembly here, because I just want to replace the clutch. So this is the only bit I need to explore. However, I may take the rest of it apart, particularly the solenoid, just because, you know, this whole unit is quite old now. It's what? How old's the bike? What? It's like 15 years old, so it's had a lot of use. So it might be just worth taking it apart just to re-grease things and check for wear and what have you as well. I want to remove the drive housing, which is this front bit here. So in order to do that, it's held on with two bolts which are sunk. I don't know if you can see here and here, there's two bolts that are sunk. They have Phillips crossheads on them, but they're also 9mm bolts. And then also, so that will disconnect this back part, but also I need to disconnect the motor here, because from the motor here, the end of the motor armature, there is a drive gear, which then runs an idler gear, which sort of sits in here, which you'll see, which is on roller bearings, which then connects across to the drive shaft and drives this drive shaft. So I need to take this, you know, whole bit apart. I don't know if you can see, but there is actually you can see there's actually a line across there, and that's where it's, this line across here is where it comes off. Anyway, let's talk more action. Let's take it apart. On some models, there's a little chrome plate sits on the end of here, but not on mine. Mine's a Fat Bob, so there's just these little plastic covers on the end of here, which you can take off. And then these are 8mm nuts on here, but the whole assembly is covered in this sort of crinkly paint stuff, which I'm just trying. I've got an 8mm spanner here, and it just won't quite fit on there because of this crinkly coating on there, and of course a 9mm will be too big. So what I'm going to have to do is just clean up that nut in order to be able to get my spanner on it. Just going at it with a wire brush. This coating it's quite thick. This crinkle paint is quite thick. I mean, I could fetch it off, but I just need to be able to get the spanner on. It's, with it being sort of crinkle paint, it's quite soft. There you are. If I just kind of wiggle that on, I can get it on there, and then break that off, and then start undoing this. Again, it's just quite a tight fit. You can see the whole bolt is coming out there, so it's coming out of this end. Doesn't matter, it's as broad as it's long, as long as it undoes. It's a bit like underseal stuff is this. It's really kind of quite thick, and as you can see, it's kind of, as I'm working this nut, it's flaking off. I think what I probably do is, when I've got this apart, I'm just going to get this on the wire brush, the power wire brush, and just fetch all that coating off there. I've just zoomed in a bit closer so you can see. So you can probably see here, I've undone both of these. Well, the whole rod has come out, but I can't. I was going to pull it out, but it won't pull through because this coating, this kind of crinkly black coating on it, is so thick that it won't pull through the hole there. Doesn't really matter, because this is the end that I want to remove, and I've got the thread clear on both sides of that end, so this can just stay in situ with the motor housing here. So that's the motor housing undone. So now I have to undo the solenoid housing from the drive, and that's these two Phillips head ones, which as I said, are that you don't have to use the Phillips head. They're actually bolts as well. So I'll just get my socket on here and undo them. Yeah. That's coming out quite easily because that's not all covered in this crinkle stuff, just the head. I think they must paint it with this after it's been assembled, because everything's covered in it. So you can see the head of that has got this crinkly black paint on, but the shaft is fine. So that's one out, and the other one on this side, this one here. Right, so that's both of those out. Okay, so now I can remove this drive housing. So this should just separate. I might have to tap it with a mallet, but it's just separate. But before I do that, I just point out that when you take this apart, you have to be careful. A couple of things. One is there is at the end of the plunger that comes from the solenoid here, there's a spring, and there's a ball bearing sits inside the drive shaft. You don't want to lose that ball bearing. And also there's an idler gear between the motor gear here and the drive shaft, and that runs on some roller bearings, which again can drop out, so you just have to be careful that you don't lose those. But actually, this is just coming off. I didn't need to tap it at all, so that's quite loose, and I can see, yeah, the roller bearings there just starting to come out. So let me see. So that's the spring that I refer to. Hang on, I'll just zoom in. Okay, that's the spring. So there's a ball bearing sits on the end of that spring, which will be inside the shaft. So this is the drive housing there. So it'll be inside that shaft. I can see it at the bottom. I don't know if you can see the angle. If you can just see it shining there. There's a ball bearing in there. Be careful not to lose. And this is what I mean. This is the idler gear. And can you see there's 5 roller bearings on there, which are loose, which will just drop out. So I'm just going to put this over to one side now, and so I can start disassembling this. So this idler gear just pulls out, and as you can see, the roller bearings are coming out with it. Oh, my hand's in the way, but if I just tip that, you can see the roller bearings are coming out there on my hand. Put those safely to one side, and then the sort of nylon bearing cage, which you can pull out. And then this is the drive shaft assembly. I'll just see if I can tap that ball bearing. It might be held in with grease. I'll just see if I can tap it out. No, it's sitting in there, so that it's quite safe at the moment. I'm not going to lose it. Okay, so now this is the drive shaft that I need to remove, and it should just tap out. It's just push fit with there's an O-ring inside it. So if I tap on this end, it should just push out this way. Right, let's see if we can tap this out. I'm just going to hold it in my hand because that sort of prevents any damage, and I've just got a small rubber mallet here, so I'll just, there you are, that comes out. There we are. So that is the clutch and drive assembly, and that is what I'm going to replace. Here's the replacement starter clutch assembly I'm going to put in. It's an all balls one, is this aftermarket one. I live in the UK, so I bought this from Hog Parts in the UK. I get a lot of stuff from them. They're great, really great supplier. Not only did they send me the replacement starter clutch assembly, but they also, with it, send you a little packet of sweets as well, which is lovely. So you can enjoy a sweet whilst you're replacing your starter motor clutch. So this is the replacement assembly. I'm not even taking out the plastic bag yet, so I just slip that up and get that out. And there you can see that is a direct replacement for the one that's come out. Before I fit this this new clutch drive assembly, I'm going to thoroughly clean up the inside of the housing here and re-grease everything. I've got the idler gear here, the roller bearings cage, don't you can see this, and that's the ball bearing which I've retrieved from the bottom of the shaft. I need to reuse all of those parts. I've also got in the kit here a couple of replacement O-rings, and they go on the inside of the drive housing here, and that's what actually you know, seals the unit when it's all together. So just going to clean up all of the inside of here first and dry it off, and then I can reassemble. If you are simply replacing this clutch assembly, which I'm doing here, this is as far as you need to disassemble the motor unit. There's no need to take the rest of this apart, because you can just fit that new clutch assembly back in here and reassemble it. However, I'm actually going to take the rest of it apart for a couple of reasons. One is, just whilst I've got it off the bike and I've got it apart, I might as well take everything apart and just check that everything else is okay and nothing else needs replacing, because it would be terrible to get it all back together on the bike and then find that something else was worn and packed in 6 months' time. But the other thing is, because I'm making a video out of this for YouTube, I know there's bound to be somebody sort of asks me, oh well, how do I do this and how do I do that? So I might as well just take the whole thing apart and you know, record that, and then we've got the whole process. This is the old clutch assembly. I'm just having a look at it, and the way it works, obviously with the clutch, it should just turn one way and not the other. So it turns this way, but then it won't turn the other way. So it will drive that way, but once the motor fires up, it will slip. And I can feel that is really quite graunchy and stiff. That's not nice at all. If I compare that, put that to one side, compare that to the new one, that's silky smooth. You know, obviously it doesn't turn that way. That's turning the whole shaft that way, but that way the clutch slips, and that's silky smooth, and it slides up and down the shaft beautifully. So yeah, there's quite a difference between the two of them. Yeah, that bearing's a little bit loose as well. I can feel there's a bit of sideways movement on that bearing. Runs freely, but yeah, you know, things wear out over time. It's had a lot of use, so owes me nothing. Getting the O-ring out from inside this housing can be a bit tricky. It's really deep down inside there, so I find it's useful to have some little picks like this for just removing rubber O-rings, because you can just hook them underneath, and there we go, comes out really simple. You know, you're not faffing around for ages. So I'm going to replace that O-ring. I'm going to take the solenoid housing apart, just take this plate off the back here. I really just want to check the solenoid contact plates, and you know, look at the plunger, maybe re-grease the plunger. So these are 7mm bolts here, but again they're covered in this crinkle paint stuff, which is making it difficult to get the socket on, but they're not very tight. Right, let's cut those loose. Should just be able to remove those by hand. Okay, that's got it. That was well and truly stuck on with that crinkly paint. There's a rubber seal in there, which I trying very careful to preserve because I don't have a replacement. Right, that's fine. Got that off fine with the rubber seal. And there's the plunger. You can see, which I can pull out. And really what I wanted to check was these solenoid contact plates. I'll just zoom in so you can see better. Right, hopefully you can see this is inside the solenoid housing, and really just I wanted to check that everything was clean and dry in here, but really these were the bits I wanted to check. These are the solenoid contact plates, and they can get worn and you can get sparking across those, you know, which then like creates an arc which you know, can damage them and erode them. But they look absolutely fine to me. The plunger here is fine, so I'm simply going to re-grease that and put it all back together. Quite happy with that. I should just say that, you know, if they are damaged, you can get replacements. You can probably see here, this whole bit here just unbolts from the outside. Same with this one, unbolts from the outside. You can take it all apart, get replacement plates and put them in there. But in this case, we're absolutely fine. I'm going to use this Castrol high melting point grease for reassembly. Now, within the solenoid housing and on this plunger, just a little bit of grease. You don't want to get too much on because you don't want grease all over the place, but as this is a moving part, this plunger moves in and out, you just want a little bit of grease on it to lubricate it. On the plunger, there's this ring here, and that's what forms the contact as the plunger moves inwards, which is, you know, the way I'm holding it, an upward direction, or moves inwards like that. That's what forms the contact across the two plates inside. So before I reassemble it, I'm just going to clean them up. There's a little bit of oxidization I can see if I use my pointer on this plate here, just a little bit of oxidization. So I'm just going to clean it up very carefully with a bit of very fine wet and dry paper, obviously being careful not to get any grit and dirt in there. Clean it out carefully just so that we've got nice clean contacts there. Right, that's the contacts cleaned up. I just used a bit of wet and dry 1200 grit, which is just what I had lying around, so I'm not, yeah, I just really wanted to polish them up and make them sure they're clean. So I'm going to put the end plate back on. Before I put it on, I'm going to put a little bit of rubber grease. This is Castrol, get that in the picture, Castrol rubber grease on the rubber seal there, because I'm reusing this seal, and just lubricate it a little bit, keep it from cracking, hopefully. This is the red stuff. Right, clean that up. So obviously I just want it on the rubber seal and nowhere else. Right, and I can reassemble this. Put those little nuts in and tighten those down. Now I'm going to reassemble the drive housing and fit it back on here. So I'm just going to first of all make sure there's plenty of grease on this plunger rod and pop the spring back on there. Put a little bit of grease on this drive cog here. Then I put this on one side and go back to the drive housing. So the drive housing, I need to put the roller bearing back on here. So I'm just going to clean up these roller bearings and this housing and re-grease those, and I'm going to use that same moly grease. Okay, that's the roller bearings back in. I've overdone it with the grease a little bit there, and clean some off, and then put this idler gear in. Put a little grease on this as well on the outside. It doesn't matter which way this goes in; it's the same both sides. Okay, that looks good. Right, so we need to then get the new O-ring inside here. Right, just need to pop this internal O-ring back in. I've just put a little bit of rubber grease on that, and just really do it by feel. Just sort of wiggle it in, press it into the groove with my fingers. You probably can't see what I'm doing, but just kind of work it round gently, and the last bit always with these things always feels like it doesn't want to go, and then it just kind of pops in and seats. So, oh, that's it. Sometimes it takes a while, but there we are. I don't know if you can see. Yeah, that's seated nicely in there. And again, I just put a little bit more grease around the inside of that. Okay, so now we can slide the clutch assembly in here. Here's the new clutch assembly. So again, I'm going to put some moly grease on the cogs here. And slide that in. And it should just be a press fit in there. It goes through. Looks like that's seated. That clicked into place. So I think we're fine there. Excellent. Right. So now we can reassemble the two parts of the housing, but not forgetting, first of all, the important ball bearing that needs to be dropped down inside there, and then that will be retained in place when I put that. So the way I'm going to do it is, so that I don't lose that ball bearing and I don't lose my roller bearings in here, I'm going to keep it that way up and drop the rest of the housing on so I know it's secure, and then push that in, and that's all engaged now, so I can tighten that up. Okay, top those down in a minute. I'll just redo these here, which hold the motor housing in place. You probably see, if you watch my mechanicking videos, I try and do as much stuff with my fingers as I can. I just feel that you've got more sensitivity and more feel there. You're less likely to break things and strip threads and what have you. Obviously, you need you need sockets or spanners when it's tighter, but it's nice just to do things by hand, just to make sure that you've got that thread running properly, as I have there. And then when you know that you've got the thread running properly, then you can get your spanner out. Okay, so that is the motor assembly all back together. So I'm going to pop it back on the bike. Now, refitting it on the bike is just the reverse order of removing it. I'll probably video it, but I may not include it in the video if this video is getting a little bit too long, because it's very simple. You essentially put it back in, two bolts holding it in, and then just connect up the electrics again. So fairly straightforward. Right, so that's the starter motor back on the bike. We're all back together and good to go. So I hope you found that video interesting. I hope you found it useful if you considering doing this job and you've not done it before. As I said at the beginning of the video, I'll put an information sheet that you can download for free on my Buy Me a Coffee account. There'll be a link to that in the description to this video below. If you would like to buy me a coffee, of course, I will be absolutely delighted. I love coffee, but please don't feel obliged. I just produce these videos just to share information that is helpful for other people. So thanks very much. Ride safe. Hopefully see you again soon. Bye.